What is Web 3.0?
It's the new frontier of the internet.
Now let's make it simple. NFTs are changing the world, and change can feel complicated and scary. But listen, you don't need a computer science degree. You don't need to learn how to code. You just need practical skills to win.
If you are here, you are in the 1% of humans that are preparing for this major cultural shift. We're going to keep it fun. We're going to keep it light. We're going to make it practical. Welcome to NFTs Made Simple.
Just a reminder, we're not financial advisors. This is not financial advice, and you should do your own research.
Hey, let's get into it.
Dragon, what's up? How we doing?
We're back. I'm excited.
Bro, I got to say that, you know, it's 2022, and I grew up pre-smartphone, pre-internet. You know, we used to have newspapers thrown. I remember I used to read cartoons out of the newspaper. Then all of a sudden this thing happened called the internet. And you may have remembered this AOL going, but you got to walk me through this a little bit. You know, people are using this term Web3 all the time. And I kind of get a grasp on it, but can we just go back in time and talk about the evolution of the internet, right? Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Take me back to Web 1.0. And what does that mean to you?
Well, I think it's important to start right now and just because we have all different types of generations listening to our podcast, as you know. So the dragon is a 50-year-old dragon, and I have, a son in college right now, and he actually goes to the same college as me, and I'm going to visit him, and, I'm just thinking, like, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have anything. Right. As a matter of fact, I told him that the most advanced form of technology that we had was in the library. We had this thing called microfiche. I don't even know if you know what the hell that is, but it was like a way of like looking up archives of newspapers. The only person that had a device was the drug dealer, and that was called a beeper. Right. He was the hooligan. He was the guy that he said, I have to go, unless he was a doctor. But my friends in college were not doctors. Right.
We had these things called payphones where you would go and you'd say, hey, I'm going to be at this store. And then if you missed them there, you had to go on the payphone and try to call them. Yeah, there was no GPS. I remember having a huge road atlas of every road in the United States. It was crazy. It was crazy.
I was trying to explain to my daughter the other day that the phones that we used to use had wires that connected them. And it was funny because she's 12 and she said, why? She didn't understand. So I had to actually find something in the house. And ironically, what I found were her VR goggles that she has for her game that just happened to have a wire that connects into her PlayStation. And I'm like, that's what I mean. And she's like, oh, but that's just for power or something like that. So she didn't even understand about connectivity wirelessly from one thing to another. So
and I think what's interesting about that is, historically, people are always afraid of what's happening next. We don't understand what's happening next. And so when we hear this term Web3, I think it's hard for us to kind of comprehend, which I think is why it's important to look at Web 1.0, which was basically just a bunch of random websites that you could maybe set up a business, but nobody's actually going to go visit your website, right? It was really hard to find things.
It was actually, I remember there was talk about it and it didn't make any sense, internet, because that word didn't make any sense. But when it came out, it was super cool. It was a little bit hard to access because it was like a new thing that you had to find out how to access. But what it was mainly about was finding information, and then it kind of evolved into maybe you could do a little bit of advertising on it. So for me, it was like another version of television. Right. And then as it advanced, now I never knew that there was a Web 1 and a Web 2. I just thought that Web 2 was the internet getting better. Right. But I didn't understand what a massive shift it was. But when we evolved into Web 2, we started deriving the ability to communicate with each other. And that's where wireless came out and that evolved into Bluetooth and, music and downloading songs and all of that stuff. Just think about how massive that shift was when we went to Web 2 and we just started seeing it move faster than we were as human beings. So, just to catch people up to Web 3, we've come a long way in Web 2. As a matter of fact, we're communicating with you right now in Web 2. Through this
I would also just kind of add that I really think when I think of Web 2.0, I think of social media. right? There's a few select sites where everybody communicates, right? You go into your Facebook page or your Twitter page, programs like Airbnb and Uber, YouTube. Like this is what's interesting about Web 2.0, right? It's very usable. Everybody's there, but it seems like there's a centralization, right? There's a centralization of where you actually engage and meet with people, which is nice. Which is nice. There's advantages to that, but there's also disadvantages, right? Maybe if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time, you could get banned, and then all of a sudden you're removed from the public square. I mean, we saw that happen with a lot of, like, the president of the United States has gotten banned off of social media, right? For better, for worse, it did happen, and that's relevant. So I think that's an important distinction between, what we see in this Web 2.0 atmosphere is a real centralization where there's a few major players that hold all the cards. And whether you like it or not, I love Amazon, but sometimes it kind of stinks that I can't go to the mom and pop shop because Amazon is just so freaking simple. It's so easy. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, what I've learned is that there's some super, super smart dudes. And a smart dude for me is just somebody that's put the work in. So I consider you and I smart dudes because we work so hard at learning things. We just don't want to unveil how smart we are yet.
I try. Don't tell honestly, if you could tell my wife that, it would help me a lot. I appreciate that.
So, here's what's interesting about these smart people that do the work. They've created these portals of entry and platforms that we communicate on, like Mark's saying, social media and everything, or Amazon, and the herd mentality. There's a very, very distinct behavior that we found out from commercials and stuff. I mean, this is a world that got people to smoke cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like, you want to know the power of social media and just, being affected by, the looks of men and women, the beautiful people and the influencers and all that stuff. This is a world,
clickbait.
Yeah.
Like, we live in this clickbait world, which is, which is pretty ridiculous.
It's a world that is so impactful and influential that it can get people to do things that are bad for them. So that's what happened in my view. That's what happened is we started to notice, like, who's watching. I don't know if you've ever experienced this in that world, but I almost feel like if I just say a word, if I call Mark up on the phone and I say, like, yeah, I could go for some pizza right now, it's like all of a sudden an ad will come up for pizza. So this whole Big Brother thing is happening. And that's what that centralization means, is that you're playing in these playgrounds that are being governed by someone. And that gives that someone, just like the junk food industry, the ability to manipulate the herd. So as we moved through, and if you're doing financial transactions in that world, who knows what that means? We started seeing people getting their cards hacked, and all this stuff is happening in there. It's an unsafe place, and everybody knows it, but we're still using it like crazy.
And you also might have a hard time getting financing. There's, billions of people in the world that are underbanked because they don't get approval from JP Morgan Chase or Wells Fargo. It's all centralized.
Yeah.
And the advantage of that is things can happen and you can, quote unquote, trust that this big company or this big corporation has your best interests in mind. But it only takes one bad apple at that organization to bring you to zero. Or if a company goes bankrupt, you go to zero, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about what's happening with Web 3.0 is, to your point, it's a decentralization. It's a lot different. It's built on these blockchains, which again, we're going to talk about in a couple episodes. But it's this concept of, I don't need to trust that this entity, that this organization has my best interests in mind. Everything is trustless because the system, you just put your trust in the actual blockchain, in this actual technology itself, which is I think really compelling.
Well, yeah. So when I started hearing about that idea, that's what intrigued me. Historically, I've watched my kids grow up playing like Fortnite and all that stuff. And I started to get curious a while ago when I would start to get like emails that said like, thank you for your purchase of $100 of a special elixir potion and an axe that mines ore. And I would go to my kids like, what the hell just happened? And they didn't even know that they were spending money on what's called digital assets. I never heard of that before. And the worst part about that, Mark, was I don't get anything back. Like I said, I used to joke with my kids and say, what do you get for it? And then I watched my kids say, I can mine ore now. And I go, but what are you going to do with the ore? And they're like, get to the next level where I'm going to spend more of your money. So it was all about spending. But here's something interesting that I noticed is I used to play this game called Myst. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's the coolest game ever, MYST, and there were different versions of it. And, you go through these virtual worlds and everything like that. But what was interesting, what I liked about it the most is while I was in there, nobody knew I was in there. I never had anybody call me up and say, hey, man, that was pretty killer what you did by decoding that machine today in Myst. It was my own world. So that was my first experience in being in a safe virtual world. And I just want to make something clear right now as a father. And I don't know if anybody ever heard Elon Musk talk about the status of like artificial intelligence and virtual reality, but he made a very valid point one time. And I'm very, very much into this. He goes, we're at a point now, we're at an inflection point now where we're so close to being in a world where we can experience virtual reality to the point where we will no longer be able to differentiate the difference between it and what we call the real world.
Yeah.
And then he goes further and says, for all of you parents out there, where are your children spending more time? In which world? And then all of a sudden I said, our children are getting groomed to be more comfortable living in a virtual reality to the point where they don't want to be in reality. So this whole thing that I'm watching, here's my entrepreneur side. This is why I'm excited about this podcast. I started saying, I see it coming. I see it coming because those smart dudes, like the guy that created Ethereum and this, mysterious guy who nobody seems to know who created Bitcoin. It's like all these mysterious smart dudes out there. But what they're doing is they're capitalizing on something that can't be stopped. And part of me says, damn, because I have kids, right? But the other part of me says, I got to be involved in this or else I'm just going to be on the sidelines watching the greatest game ever played, but never getting involved in it.
Yeah, well, it is definitely happening. And there's just like everything in life, there's pros and cons to everything, Dragon. It's like yin and yang, right? There's going to be benefits. There's going to be expenses. But I mean, a lot of people I hear say things like, oh, Mark, I'll never be in the metaverse. I'll never put on VR goggles and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, well, I hate to sell you, but you're already living in the metaverse now. The average person is spending 100 days a year on their smartphone. 100 days. That's over a quarter of your life is on the smartphone. And we're only going to get more and more integrated as Web 3.0 comes out. Hey, what's up? Mark here. Just want to take you on a quick break with a resource I think is really going to help you. Some of the concepts that we're covering in the show sound really complicated and really technical. But listen, you don't need to code. You don't need to get a master's degree in computer science. All you need to do is have the right resources. We're going to make it simple. We're going to make it easy. I've got a link below. Go to www.nftsmadesimple.com. That's nftsmadesimple.com. You're going to get a free cheat sheet there. It's 100% free. What are you waiting for? Go get the cheat sheet. We're going to break down some of the key definitions in ways that are really practical and really simple. Go to nftsmadesimple.com right now to get your free cheat sheet. That's nftsmadesimple.com. All right, let's get back into the show. Another key feature, we've already talked about a couple key features of Web 3.0, is artificial intelligence. Machine learning, and you might say, oh, I don't like this. The machines are going to know more about me. We're moving into the matrix and all that. But at the same time, I mean, like, I'll give you an example. We just signed up for DirecTV just recently. I've been putting it off for a long time. Got DirecTV. They send you these little remote controls that have voice analyzers, and then it starts suggesting shows that you might also want to watch, right? And you might say, well, this is whack. I want to find my own shows or whatever, but it's pretty freaking cool when you're able to find shows easily. And when the machine can actually listen to you and interpret that and take you where you want to go. And, I don't know exactly where Web 3.0 is going, but it obviously is happening. I like to think of it, Dragon, as power going back to the people. Instead of having these centralized powers in a few small corporations, like 5 billionaires, they control everything. It's power back to the people, at least for now. And if you're able to jump on these trends, if you're able to understand them, not only are you going to be able to learn and build success and wealth for your family, but you're also going to avoid the pitfalls, because there are going to be some major pitfalls, which for me, I'm skeptical by nature. I like to ask lots of questions. I think that for me, Dragon, is one of the most important things, because it is happening. If you're not learning, you're putting yourself in a really dangerous position. And quite frankly, if you're listening right now, you're in the 1%. You're in the top 1% of people. You're not late. You're right on time. We're in the first inning. And I cannot wait to get into more and more of these concepts. And right next up, we're going to be talking about what an NFTs is and some of the practical applications. Any thoughts, Dragon, before we get into the next episode on what an NFT is?
You made a lot of really good points. And, there's a lot of fear associated with all this. But, the way I look at it, I think everybody is at that inflection point in their own life where, just like I was when the internet came out, I resisted it. I remember when Facebook came out, I resisted it. I said, oh, I don't do that. Well, I was a doctor, and somebody says, are you on Facebook? And I'm like, I don't do that crap.
I don't believe in it.
Yeah. And now my 18-year-old is not on Facebook because he says it's for old losers, so there's just so many change, and we're always, getting involved in that. But the way I look at it is, it's like we're moving to a new country, and you have no choice. You're moving to a new country, and they speak a different language there. And you have a choice to either go there and just live a subpar life, not knowing how to speak the language, just getting by, good enough is good enough, can't complain. Or, because you have this time and because you have this podcast and this journey ahead of us, like I'm excited for a 1-year journey right now together. You have an opportunity in a safe way. I like to think of our podcast as a psychological safe haven, where you can come here and at your own pace, learn and have some fun and learn about these things. We're going to bring in experts at the right time, because when you hear an expert, you might get a panic attack when they come in. So we're going to teach you guys, we're going to teach you the basic language and get you feeling confident in all of these little things from our next episode, how to get started with an NFT, what is an NFT? And then as we go, you're going to be able to evolve and elevate into more advanced versions of yourself, to where you'll look at yourself when you started listening to this podcast and say, man, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. And then all of a sudden you're going to wake up and you're going to be comfortable and playing in this new arena that's here to stay.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Let's move on to the next episode, where we're going to break down what an NFT actually is and how you can use them.